This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
Hi. Hello. When is the last time you questioned the definition of success? For many, the chase for traditional success can feel like a baited trap, pandering to the very worst of our ego and insecurity. Today's guest, in what is going to be the last episode of the Possibility Club for some time, and I'll come on to that later, offers a fresh perspective on leadership and career building, drawing on her unique experiences from frontline medicine to high-level policy work and now coaching and consulting. My guest has delivered babies in war zones with Médecins Sans Frontières, shaped global health policies with the UN. But a big leap came in 2016 when she founded a coaching and consulting practice, working with some of the world's highest achievers and game changers, redefining their paths to fulfillment. So what can we learn from medical practice about resilience, purpose, communication that can support every line of work? If all professionals had an opportunity to reflect deeply on what actually matters to them before leaping into the next job, how much more likely would productivity, adaptability and success, whatever that means, be? How can we challenge the conventional metrics of success and emphasise the importance of aligning our careers with personal values and well-being and growth? These questions explore the power of adaptability and continuous learning, illustrating how professionals can thrive amidst uncertainty and change if they make the right decisions. In her book, The Success Trap, my guest explores how society's narrow definition of success can lead to personal dissatisfaction and a loss of true purpose. She provides ideas on how professionals can break free from conventional career constraints and how her work highlights the critical lessons that frontline medicine can teach about leadership and the importance of maintaining a sense of purpose in high-stakes environments in a volatile and complex world. She's an honorary associate professor and senior clinical lecturer at University College London. She continues to educate on health inequalities and global health. She's a doctor, an author, a consultant. Her life's work reflects a powerful synthesis of medical expertise, psychosocial theory, and mindful communication, which is unusually powerful when looked at through the lens of the careers we build. I'm Richard Freeman. This is the Possibility Club. And my special guest in this last episode for a while is Dr. Amina Aitzi Selmi. I always like to imagine people on the bus, walking the dog, in the gym or up a mountain. I'm sure you're doing one of those things. But thank you for lending me your ears. As always, I am joined by an extraordinary guest and we're looking at themes of bravery and leadership, impact and change. And I've got a very informed expert to help me navigate that conversation, Dr. Amina Aitzi Selmi. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you, Richard. It's great to be here.
So welcome to the Possibility Club. Thank you for joining me. I mean, let's start big. Let's start broad. Tell me a little bit about your story, your journey. You know, where did your career begin, and what was the sort of early motivations for a young Amina showing up in the world?
Let's start in Algeria, which is where I first started, where I was born and partly grew up. I grew up between Algeria and Yorkshire. Then started thinking about what I wanted to do when I grow up and go to university. And at the time, it was engineering and electronics engineering, which I realized in hindsight was basically what is now, I guess, coding and working on AI. So I think had we stayed in Algeria, then I might be some kind of coder or something like that. Who knows? A tech person, perhaps. But when we moved back to the UK when I was nearly 16, I developed an interest in working more with people. And I was told, well, that's medicine. If you like science and people, then you go and do medicine. And I thought, okay, fine, I'll do that. But in the second year, I realized I didn't want to do clinical medicine. I was interested in the big picture. So that was public health, that was demography, that was epidemiology, statistics, all these things that most people would find boring, perhaps. But I find fascinating because it gave you this sense of an overview, and then you could intervene at a population or societal level, not just at individual level. So once I discovered that was my track, I was like, that's what I'm doing. And for 4 years or so at university that I was orienting that way. I was also advised that it was good to get clinical experience before going into something like policy or research. So people would give you sort of the respect and treat you as a proper doctor. So I did do 4 years or so of clinical medicine, working in hospitals, getting experience of different specialties. I traveled, spent a year in Switzerland in the hospital there, and also with Médecins Sans Frontières in South Sudan, working in a humanitarian mission. And from there, I started then specializing in public health medicine and did a master's and a PhD just to top it off. That brings in politics, it brings in economics, because these decisions aren't just scientific.
Well, what an extraordinary breadth, of areas to delve into. I mean, really exciting that you were able to kind of follow your nose and apply yourself there. To the outside eye, it would feel like there's quite a big gap between the sort of policy, public health, maybe slightly more academic modeling of how society works compared to being on the ground, being in a clinic, making tools. Do you see there an effective join-up, I guess, between policy and practice in all the different geographical places you've worked? Or do you feel that there's still wasted energy?
Well, I think that's the puzzle of public health. It's always trying to link up between political decision-making and making a difference to people in daily life. So that is the science and art of public health. But that's what every leader is, and anybody who's trying to make an impact is trying to navigate. How do I bridge the ideas, the vision of what's possible with actually getting stuff done? What's my timeline? How much delay of payoff am I willing to tolerate? Like, am I willing to work towards a vision that won't happen within my lifetime? Or do I need to see a payoff immediately? Do I need to go into, work every day and see people saying thank you to me, thanking me for, saving their lives or something? I had maybe more of a comfort with ambiguity and uncertainty than maybe other people, but I guess it's just a personal preference.
And what kind of historical timeline was this on when you were at the kind of peak of your work in public health? And how far was that before the COVID pandemic?
Well, I wasn't working in public health by the time the pandemic happened anymore. So I can't speak from the inside, but from the outside, as a member of the public who's sort of informed professionally on those matters, it does seem like there's a better understanding and maybe a bit more respect for what public health is. But there is a bit of a nuance in that within public health, there is a difference. There's a distinction between infectious disease public health and public health that deals with not infectious diseases. So chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease. And then it can get even more sort of ambiguous when you start to put climate change in, because climate change does have an impact on health, but the causal chains are a bit longer perhaps. And so people don't always understand why public health is also involved in climate change, but it has to be. And this, I think, ties up with what the private sector calls ESG, environmental, social, and governance. To me, what the private sector is trying to tackle with ESG is what public health is doing when it's bringing health and climate change together. And for me, it'd be wonderful if the links would be made more closely so that the silos, between those sectors would be less thick, and people could get more clarity on what the big goals are or what the big vision is for a better society. Nobody wakes up in the morning saying, yes, I want more climate change, or I want more, heat waves.
It sounds like from that kind of policy perspective, you're saying we need to look at this holistically. We need to understand the whole picture and where we sit within it. But do you feel that politics arbitrarily keeps things in those silos because it feels the public aren't maybe smart enough to understand the sort of the link between health and environment, and it tries to package stuff up and separate it in a way that, I mean, from my perspective, feels unhelpful?
I think people are smart. It's not, these sort of things are intuitive. It's more that it's maybe hidden or clouded, or there's a lot of distractions with polarization. And I don't know if media help with public understanding because they've got their own constraints and imperatives. it's not that hard, I think, to understand that CO2 emissions in one place, get into the ecosystem, the atmosphere, and that has an impact on what happens in another place. And that what happens in another place affects what happens here because it affects, resources and supply chains and things like that. I don't think it's fundamentally that hard. I think it's just that there's so much stress and so much fear and anxiety that survival mechanisms that narrow attention and mean I just focus on what I'm doing right now and my stuff and my bills and my whatever takes over. I'm not sure that it's necessarily about understanding as much as it is about creating a sense of safety in society through, social safety nets, through, having the particular dialogues and particular political dialogue that's wise and sensible, not polemical and inflammatory, having media that actually inform and help people think sensibly, critically, not in a polarized way. In a way, it's more of a emotional or psycho-emotional than a purely intellectual issue.
Was that a really conscious shift for you to be able to take some of that more macro level understanding and then kind of put it in individual people's hands so that they feel more equipped, or was it a sort of less strategic than that?
Yeah, no, I'm so happy you understood my path. It's like it's so nice when someone just gets it. I would say it was part strategic, part just how life unfolded. Because by my mid-30s, I was sort of living the dream that I had when I was starting off, thinking, I want to work on global health policy and have this impact. And through some serendipitous circumstances, it worked out, and it was very exciting. There was also something in parallel that started to happen, which is like, where is this going? Am I just going to live this sort of dream life, flying around the world to these conferences, talking to people who basically we all agree, living in this echo chamber? Yeah, and even the idea of flying around while talking about climate change just started to grate. I was like, that just does not make sense. And of course, that is the job, but there was something in me that was shifting, and there was just a need for to explore something deeper, bigger, different. And then I always loved coaching at medical school. I was interested in psychology. I've always been interested in spirituality and just how a human being works. Let's just try that. Sometimes you wonder, like, how you suspend disbelief and just do things. And so that's how I ended up in 2016, basically not applying for the next step in the career ladder. And the coaching did take off. So that's what I've been doing for 8 years. And it has satisfied or somehow brought together the fulfillment that comes from working directly with people, but also bringing in all that understanding of what's happening systemically and helping people to situate themselves and to have a lot more nuance and complexity when they're making decisions about their careers or their teams or their impact.
This is an Always Possible podcast, but making podcasts is really only one way in which we help people drive forward economic development and social innovation. We're Sussex born and bred, but work across the UK and sometimes further to design and deliver big projects that promote social mobility, digital transformation and equality of opportunity in business, culture and education. Projects that tell the story of growth and creative thinking in cities, sectors and communities. Projects that enable emerging leaders as well as big brands to define, measure and communicate their impact. We work with teams who know that their mission is a bit braver and a bit more ambitious than others. If that sounds like you, then we need to meet. Come say hello at alwayspossible.co.uk. That's alwayspossible.co.uk. This city.
This is a quick note to say that the Brighton Paradox will be back. Season 2 will be a shorter, tighter series looking at the energy, impatience and opportunity happening in post-pandemic Brighton and Hove. We're examining the landscape across the city in 2024, what's changing, what's building in economics, culture, community and technology. Why are people telling me that they are in fight or flight mode? What is the significance of a council with an overall majority? How is artificial intelligence maybe changing the way people solve problems in the city? And of course, how has a podcast changed the lives of Brighton's children? And it's not this one. All new interviewees and all new explorations of the city. But right now we're still gluing the jigsaw together, so you'll have to wait a little bit longer. But we are delighted to announce that we're being supported again by Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club, who return as brilliant headline sponsors and partners. And the University of Brighton's Help to Grow management programme also returns as a really valuable project partner. And in addition, we have two new supporters, the exceptional folk at EQ Investors and the legends at Midnight Communications. And we couldn't do this without all of these visionary people. Brilliant. Thank you. Take care. Speak soon. You've written a really interesting book that's had quite a lot of attention around careers or jobs and how we maybe find ourselves doing something that does not play to our real instincts for curiosity and freedom. So do you feel that the sort of agency and consciousness around careers and the choice around careers and how you build a career that's doing something very different in the 2020s, and people need to think about it differently than perhaps 30 years ago?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I think of careers as an opportunity for liberation. So 21st century careers are a path to liberation. And what does that mean? Because the model is changing, some of it is breaking apart, and then new models of careers are emerging. That really feed into the system, the systemic changes. So how do you make a living? What does it mean to work? What's enough, So to me, a career inflection point or career crisis, if it's coming up that way, is an opportunity to dig deeper, to start to question, what's the model I followed so far? Did I just do what my parents were telling me, or did I rebel against what my parents were telling me? And now I get to question, what is true for me now? What is really, how do I want to orient my life? What are my values? What kind of world do I want to live in? And what does that mean now, today, so that I can live my life, but also feel like I'm contributing to something I really believe in? So yes, the career questions get answered, but they also get so much more.
And you talk about leadership a lot, and I think it's sometimes harder for leadership behaviors to rise when there's so much noise out there. What do you think makes good leadership characteristics in the 21st century to deal with some of the big challenges and opportunities that we've got right now?
Yeah, thanks for the question. A model I was playing with recently was CROP. I called it CROP for leadership. Are you a CROP leader? Doesn't exactly fit, but it's basically a cross-paradigmatic, revolutionary sense maker and change maker.
Okay.
Yeah, and revolutionary with an R in brackets, because I think it's both. You have to be able to make the bold moves, but you also have to be the consistent and also stabilize things. So we need both in the system. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of the characteristics, so self-leadership, it starts with self-leadership. A leader who doesn't have any self-awareness, any empathy, any understanding of their own intentions and motivations and how they perceive reality and the impact of that, to me, is not fit to lead, because they're just projecting their own ego and their own beliefs and biases without any awareness, and that's dangerous in my view. The next thing, what was the next thing? The next thing was a moral compass. So as I commented on your website, being able to have an ethical sensibility of basically what's right and wrong, extracting from nature, extracting from people is not great. So I think a basic, I draw a lot of inspiration from Buddhist philosophy and practice, and just basic precept, but basic moral compass is important. And then the next thing is what we talked about earlier, I think, the ambiguity tolerance. So being able to be okay and regulate emotionally when in the face of uncertainty. and not fall into a stereotype of authoritarianism or just complete laxity. And then sense making of complexity. So an ability to sort of be okay with lots of complex information, even if you don't understand it, or you can find your path within it.
Do you feel that there's now a good embedded culture of leadership development in the places that you see? Or do you think actually, on the whole, we're not getting it yet? And it still relies on sort of charismatic individuals to find their way through, maybe despite the system they're working in?
I think it depends on your reference point. So obviously compared to, I don't know, a century ago or something, of course, there's improvement and there's much more emphasis on well-being. There's much more emphasis on self-awareness and development and all sorts of great things, I think. So yeah, even if you go on a training website of a large organization, there's some great, there's some amazing things on there that people can learn from and use for their own development. Now, if you compare it to the ideal, which is we need more of these types of leaders, more leaders who are self-aware. And it's not just the leaders, because it's the whole ecosystem that needs to evolve. All of us need to develop our own self-awareness and consciousness and courage. Then I think we've still got a bit to go. Yeah, and we still don't even have, theoretically, I come from science, so usually there's a sense that, we've figured quite a few things out scientifically, but it takes a while for it to trickle through policy. But I'm not sure we even have a full understanding of what's needed, in terms of leadership. I think there's something around hyper roles, what I call hyper roles. And that's drawing on some other research that talks about things like that we're constantly stimulated by hyperstimuli. So, social media, fast food, things like that. The market tries to design hyperstimuli just to give us a dopamine hit and spend our money, but kind of untraining us from what it takes to do hard work, to get something, to spend time reflecting on something and figure something out, and being autonomous in our decision-making. And it's just sort of things that we evolved to have. There's a sense that we're being hijacked, and that's not helpful in terms of our personal development and leadership development. Hyper objects, things like climate change, the massive concepts that spread over time and space, it's just hard to grapple with. So combine that complexity and ambiguity with the need for speed and shortening attention spans, and it's a bit of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So when I think about leadership or roles like, I'm a director, I'm a doctor, I'm a parent, I'm a this, I'm a that, these concepts are also massive now. Like if you think, what a parent needs to do, everything they need to pay attention to, it's just massive. The cognitive load is enormous. To emotionally regulate that, to keep a sensible mind within that is an enormous task. And that's what we're facing. But I don't think we're really talking about this issue. We're still talking about even talking about well-being. It's too limited. Mm-hmm. It's not well-being. It's the whole human self-concept is being challenged massively. And if we don't find a path within that doesn't involve anxiety, fear, and war, I don't think it's going to end very well.
No. This tremendous responsibility to understand so much and to be able to process it and to be able to make the right decisions, whilst also trying to navigate this, as you say, this kind of shortening attention span, the dopamine hits, the instant gratification, the fact that, the entire history of recorded music is in my pocket and I can press a button and listen to any song that's ever been, just all that capability that I didn't have 20 years ago that I now do. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot to try and process in order to make your world better and the world better in a way that is manageable. Are you finding any kind of emerging techniques for doing that, or ways of framing it that's helpful, so that people don't get completely either at one end of the spectrum overwhelmed because everything's too big, or the other end of the spectrum, sitting in a corner doom scrolling on their phone, with their world actually getting a lot smaller because then they're not able to sort of go out and do anything? Are you helping people to regulate and balance that more? And what's that starting to look like?
Yeah, well, I hope I'm helping. I think my clients think I'm helpful. So I draw a lot from Buddhist practice, but also from liberational psychology and, sort of straight up coaching. How I summarize my method is 3 principles. So presence, power, and possibility. Presence is the mindfulness. It's meeting reality where it is, not better, not worse. So that's developing a capacity for being in my experience as it is right now, and knowing when my mind is sort of taking off and my emotions are taking off, and having tools and techniques to regulate that, so that I never spend too much time lost in a trance of anxiety or regret or fear or even grandiosity. So that's presence. And we practice these in the sessions because these are skills we need to develop, I think, as part of being a human. Mm-hmm. The next one is power. So that's recovering a sense of autonomy and choice and agency, not giving it over to advertising, not giving it over to, even your boss or anyone, but knowing how to exercise autonomy. And that comes from questioning. That's a bit more of the liberational psychology of like, what am I believing? What's been installed in my mind that actually isn't helpful? And how is my autonomy being hijacked that I can, regain some power over? And then finally, possibility, that's the sense of co-creating the impossible, because what we want is actually will seem impossible, whether you're talking about a career or, even exercise, or you're talking about a new world that is less unequal and not as exploitative of nature and people. Mm. It's going to seem impossible. So we need to walk it step by step. Also, the relationships come in here because we're losing our ability to be with each other in a meaningful way because we're so overloaded and so rushing around, and that needs to be recovered as a capacity as well. And that's how we co-create what's impossible. So those are sort of the 3 headlines, and then there are 6 practices which I call the 6 R's, and that's to relax, reflect, release, reconnect, respond, and receive.
How do you know when it's working, whether it's with your clients or and it might be immediate, it might be over time? What are the signs that people are developing that autonomy, developing that sort of regulation, finding some kind of peace and purpose in thinking about things a little bit differently? What's the feedback loop that you need to know that it's working?
Great question. It's the impact of coaching. So there's inner indicators and outer indicators. So when I start working with someone, we agree on what it is that they want to work on, what the success look like for them. So usually there's, progress on those measures. But sometimes it can change because they realize actually they're not interested in a promotion. They're interested in actually going down to 3 days a week and working on their book or something, or building their own business or something like that. So those are sort of the outer markers. But otherwise, there's this reduction, there's this alleviation of existential dread and anxiety and constant stress. So they feel more at ease, more at peace, more in control. And where they don't feel in control, they're able to let that go and realize it's not on them. This is part of the hyper role illusion. They're not here. They don't need to save the world. Some things are just out of their control, and it might be sad and difficult, but that's okay. They've got the emotional skills to deal with that. They're able to take action on the things that they want to do, that they say that they want to do and that they've been maybe procrastinating or putting off, so that life energy is reoriented towards what they really want, not towards what they were told they should want. So that, again, that could look like just doing the job differently, applying for the thing they want, or resigning. A lot of people seem to resign when they work with me and just go in a new direction. And apply for a new job, or suddenly they're offered a new job out of the blue because they're finally open to new opportunities that work for them better. Relationships improve, so their time with their family, with their children, they stop sort of passing on all this anxiety to their children and actually starts really being with them and understanding them, and it's just so much more meaningful for them. That's very satisfying, I find. And sometimes I wonder, maybe I should just focus on that for my coaching because it's so satisfying. Finally, there's their health, and also they just have a better understanding. There's less cognitive dissonance, like in the Barbie movie where, at the end she says, oh, all of this stress is because we don't understand that what we're told and what we feel are not the same, and that's okay. It's not that there's something wrong with us, it's just that the narratives are different. And that creates more clarity over life and what they want to contribute to change within their sphere of influence, make a change.
From an organisational perspective, then, if somebody says, "Oh, I'm starting to work with Dr. Amina as a coach," I can see these big bosses going, "Oh, well, on the one hand, we might have a really, really high-performing, effective leader that's really kind of feeling themselves in the world, and on the other hand, we're going to lose them because they're going to be gone." So, yeah, I could see that being a mixed.
Well, thankfully, I'm not that famous, so.
Well, that feels a good and an upbeat point to close. What an absolutely fascinating career you've had, and I really kind of love that sense of the big becoming the tangible and the small, so that people can actually hold it, but really informed by all that research and that global understanding. We'll also put links to your book and website and work in the notes to this. Just before we finish, anything else you're excited about, or that's coming around the corner that you want to point people towards, whether it's your work or something else that you're aware of, or a final bit of kind of tip or resource that you think you'd like to share?
Thank you so much. Nothing immediately coming to mind. There's all the information on my website if people are interested in my work, but I would say just for people to look after their mental health and well-being, because if you don't have that, it's really tough. So whatever pressure you're facing, just make sure that you have some space for you.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. Really great to have you as a guest on the Possibility Club. Dr. Amina Aitsi-Salmi.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard Freeman. Yes, thank you for having me on the Possibility Club. It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for your excellent questions.
Hello, me again. Thank you so much for downloading this episode of the Possibility Club. I hoped you enjoyed it as much as I did, and thanks so much to Dr. Amina for being the last guest in this series. We're going to take a little hiatus with the Possibility Club for a while. If it's good enough for Radiohead and Girls Aloud, it's good enough for us. Sometimes you need a little break. But we've got hundreds of past episodes for you to dive into, each with an extraordinary guest or series of guests. Please do go back right to the start, 2017, to find some extraordinary stories of leadership, impact and change. And please let the world know about your favourite episode with a quick written review. It really, really does help people to find us. And fear not, producer Chris and I and the Always Possible team are releasing Series 2 of our other big podcast, The Brighton Paradox, this summer, a unique exploration of the economy, culture, community and storytelling in the UK's complex and creative city by the sea. Search The Brighton Paradox in all usual podcast streams. And we have a very exciting new project launching soon, all about big change, featuring some very special guests from politics, music, business, literature, science and more. We'll update you with that very soon. Until then, thanks so much. Take care. Goodbye.
The Possibility Club is an Always Possible podcast. The interviewer was Richard Freeman for Always Possible, and the producer and editor was me, Chris Thorpe Tracy, for Lo-Fi Arts. Have a good week.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
Lo-Fi Arts.